This episode of Selling with Social is brought to you by the 10th Annual AAISP Leadership Summit, where the sales community comes together to learn, share, and network. Join Vengreso and your sales peers April 3rd through the 5th, 2018 in Chicago by visiting bit.ly/AAISP2018 and use the code LEADERSHIP1095 at registration. And now to Selling with Social.
So if you have really high quality assets in the product, the market's ready for you, and you have a great team, then I think those things come together like Voltron to form, high quality output.
Hey y'all, welcome to Selling with Social, the podcast that helps marketers increase marketing qualified leads, sales reps to shatter sales results, and sales leaders to grow as leaders. Each show, we interview sales, marketing, and social media practitioners, leaders, and influencers to help you connect, close more deals, build stronger relationships with clients, and improve your sales productivity. I'm Mario Martinez Jr. You're now listening to Selling with Social. Chris Merritt, I'm very excited for you to join me here today on Selling with Social. Thank you so much for being with me. And I'm very excited because in 2018, as you and I have talked about in our pregame show, one of the major focuses is for us to bring practitioners to the podcast. And yourself, the Chief Revenue Officer of Cloudflare, by the way, thank you for supporting us. We're a loyal customer of you guys, so we appreciate that. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Mario, thank you very much. And I'm most appreciative for you being a customer. Thank you for using our service and also giving us a plug. Thanks for that.
The good news is it works.
Can't do anything if it doesn't work. This would be a difficult hour if that were the case.
Exactly. So do me a favor, my friend. We've got sales leaders, marketing, sales enablement, and business owners that are listening into this podcast right now. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you've got an amazing history with Yahoo, Monster, now the Chief Revenue Officer of Cloudflare. A little bit about yourself, who you are, who you work for, and anything you want to say just about yourself.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate you doing that. Very humbled to be part of this program, and your audience is really valuable. So I'll try to do what I can to bring good content to them. At Cloudflare, we're basically just trying to help build a better internet. We process more than 10% of all the world's requests on a daily basis on the internet. So it's a big responsibility that we have if you're looking to make your site more reliable, more scalable, more highly performant while keeping it as secure as possible. That's really what we're here to do. And my job is really to help Cloudflare find customers, help them adopt our services, and then earn the right to do more together over time. And along the way, my responsibility is to help pay some bills. So that's me. I'm married, 4 kids. I've been in the Bay Area about 10 years. And prior to that, lived all over the world, including London and China. And very happy to be in the Bay Area. It's a great place to raise a family.
Yeah, I agree. And you have had a very sexy history in terms of working some big named organizations, Monster, Yahoo, and now Cloudflare, hot, sexy startup companies that are fairly well known. So I'm excited because there's a lot of things that you guys are doing in terms of growth that leaders who are listening in, sales individuals who manage their own individual business want to understand. How do I grow my business at an exponential rate? So we're going to get into some of those strategies, but do me a favor first, before we get really deep into this, tell us something that nobody would know by looking at your social profiles, and keep it PG, would you?
So we do that at work here at Cloudflare. We make everybody in their first week give a fun fact that you wouldn't know from the resume. And mine was pretty embarrassing. I fell down the stairs my first day at work at Cloudflare, and I figured I should out myself before somebody outed me. So that's probably my fun fact. That's not in my resume, and it's not something that I amplify, but it's top of mind.
Was anybody watching is the question.
I don't think so. It was a set of metal graded stairs coming out of the building. The wind pulled the door open, and I was holding on to it, and I just was looking behind me. Next thing I know, I look up, my glasses are broken. Fortunately, nothing else was broken. But
oh man, I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah, it was funny. Anyway, there's a fun fact for you. A little embarrassing. So PG though.
Falling down the stairs. Well, we'll save my most embarrassing story at the elevator for another show.
Fair enough.
But it's a good one there. All right. Well, listen, your guys' success at Cloudflare has been pretty amazing. And that's one of the reasons why I reached out to you. But one of the other reasons why, just from a pure who you are, and I appreciate you being so humble, Chris, but you were named as one of the top 100 global sales leaders by the Modern Sales Magazine for 2018. And I reached out to you because I said, I want to know why you got into this category, first of all. What were you doing to get into this category to be able to get a great accolade here? And so congratulations to you for being named in the top 100 2018 global sales leaders. Clearly, you're doing something right. And listeners are wanting to understand, all right, how do I explode my business? And if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, Cloudflare's business has seen an 80% year-over-year growth. Now, is that because of great salesmanship? Or is that because you have a great product? Or is that because everybody realizes they're trying to make their site faster so they can get Google to like them better? I mean, like, what is the combination? Or is it all of the above or more?
Well, it's very flattering to be recognized. And I think the credit really goes to start with the product. It's really hard to grow that fast if your customers aren't happy with what you're doing for them. So I would say it really starts with having a really strong product and getting the timing right in that. Those two things are quite difficult. And I think that we're in a good spot where we've gotten those right. And then layer on top of that, we have a great team. So if you have really high quality assets in the product, the market's ready for you, and you have a great team, then I think those things come together like Voltron to form, high quality output. And I think the 80%, the 80+% growth we've had in the enterprise side is, I think, reflective of those three things. And there are some tips and tricks and techniques that we have behind there to keep it running as in a high quality fashion as we can, but it's really a reflection of those. And I would think that if that doesn't come across, then I'm not doing my job here on this podcast.
Yeah. So, oftentimes as an example, my 21-year sales history, I have always worked for the underdog up until I formed Vengreso, which became the largest digital sales transformation provider globally, right? So this is the very first time I've ever been in a position where we're the top dog in the marketplace. Every other organization I've been with, the underdog, from a growth perspective, an ownership perspective of the market share, and maybe even subpar products and technologies, right? So would you say for those folks that are out there that are working for maybe the underdog, or maybe the product is not quite there yet, but the vision is there, like what would you say to those individuals? Either buy in on the vision and sell the vision, or go find a great product that you feel like you can stand behind to be able to be successful? Because I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of sales folks face is they say, hey, I can't sell because I don't have a great product, or we have all these issues or problems inside of our product, right? So if you have that potentially there, what do you do as a sales leader or as a salesperson?
Yeah, I think that our responsibility is to surface those things. So if it's a great product today, recognize that, embrace it, and do everything you can to make sure that that continues to happen. If you're not quite there, find those examples, those use cases that your customer is dying to solve, that real pain, and that you have a reason to believe that you could be in the consideration set to solve. And I think your primary responsibility is always to do that first and make sure you surface those things. An agent of change, I think, is a really powerful way to think about your role inside the company if the product isn't quite there. And make the company uncomfortable, make the organization uncomfortable by putting those areas in front of the company that maybe we're not as good as we think we are, or areas that we could improve upon. And there's nothing more powerful than bringing the customer into that loop. So how do you get your customers to be the mouthpiece for what the product really needs to do? And I think that's step number 1 and 2 is if you have it today, recognize that and give all credit there. If you don't have it, find a way to be an agent of change to get those things to the surface. And then if that doesn't work, then it's a gut check. And sometimes it's a time to move on if you can't quite get those magic elements to work. Voltron I referenced earlier, it's really fun. When you have a high quality product and the market timing is right, it's a lot of fun. And I think we've all been those parts of our career where you may not be on the right side of that curve. You may be lagging, or it may be post-peak and you can't quite get your groove back. Your responsibility is to try to do what you can to improve that, but at some point you may choose to move on.
Yeah, that's a great point. I appreciate what you said because, if I look at, my individual history and working for the underdogs or the underperformers, I was with a telecom organization that was shutting down one network and was forcing everybody to migrate over to another. And the other was not at parity with the one that they were shutting down. It just happened to be it was the old dinosaur type of technology. It worked, and it worked really, really, really well for the application that it had. And so when they tried to migrate and switch, it was just like massive problems over and over and over again. But you said something that was find the use case with real pain that you can fix with your particular product, right? So I think a lot of sales folks and sales leaders, you may have this whole plethora of product and technology. But if you, who with that product is really, really good at this silo or at this individual component, and go after that, right? And I think that's what you're saying is go find your sweet spot right there and go find that pain. And ultimately, frankly, we should be looking for the customer's pain anyways when we're doing prospecting and understanding if there's an opportunity at the table. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that if you remember, if you take nothing away from today, I borrowed shamelessly from Christian Chabot, who was the CEO of Tableau for a while. He was very vigilant around, your job is to find customers, help them adopt services, and then earn the right to do more. And if you think about it in that continuum, if you can find those use cases where your service is applicable, your job is to find those use cases, find those customers, and then help them adopt. That's just a very strong lens through which you'll determine really quickly if you have the product that works, if you have a solution that works. And I think us as sales professionals, as you look forward in your career, this may not be the last time or the first time that you're calling on that person or that company. And I think it's incumbent upon you to figure out if you do, in fact, have a solution that'll work. And if you do, great. Find ways to get it deployed. If you don't, keep that relationship healthy so that when you do, or if you can have them help you be an agent of change to bring that use case to the surface in your company, that's really your job. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of when it works, great. When it doesn't, maintain that relationship. So you have the right to go back later.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, find the customer, help them adopt, then earn the right to do more. Right. So it's like the land and expand concept that we always talk about. But, some of these fundamentals are just fundamentals. They're back to basics. And I agree with you in that particular case. Now, the other thing you said was, if you're challenged from a product perspective, have your customers, have them be the mouthpiece. Right.
That's right.
And I have a perspective on this, and I'd love to bounce this off of you. But my perspective is, look, at the end of the day, I want my salespeople bringing the customers to the table. But my perspective also is I believe that from a help to drive change, that's the role of the first line and second line leaders, right? Mm-hmm. When your salespeople bring something up to you as a leader and they say, hey, look, we're having this challenge. Our product or technology doesn't have this, but if we have this, we could be, right? Then the leader should then engage, and the leader should bridge that customer with the product development team, the engineering team, the development team, whoever it is on the inside. And they should create those conversations to have with the customer and with the product development team. Two things happen. Number one, your leaders are involved, so you're never going to lose alone, right? And number two, you're actually showcasing to a customer that you want to hear what their thoughts are. And think about this. How many customers are actually in the prospecting cycle talking with the development and or the product development team of any organization? Usually it's sales engineering. It's very unlikely that you're talking, and maybe if it is, it's a very low amount of time that you're spending. But customers then start to feel like, wait a minute, this company really is interested in me helping them. That helps to build that relationship. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think that our role in a selling capacity is to try to bridge conversations. And oftentimes you have in your bag the things that you need to be able to help a customer solve a pain point. And there's a beautiful thing around human nature, which if you get two people together and one of them shares that they have a problem, it's very consistent that people will, on the other side, will try to solve it. And it's a really exciting thing to watch in a selling capacity where you have these things in your bag, you bring them out to help solve problems. And that's the best part of our job when you're actually solving somebody's problem. Sometimes you don't have the things in your bag that you need. And the way you bridge that conversation is you get the product team involved. And we have a responsibility not to bring things to product that aren't fully thought through. So you have to be responsible and make sure that you've exhausted all the tools that you have in your bag. But at that point, bridge the conversation between the product team and the customer that represents the needs that you're seeing in the marketplace that perhaps are going or you can't quite get a solution that makes sense for them. And I think you'll find that wonderful human interaction come back to the surface again, where the product team will start trying to find ways with the roadmap and with the resources that they have to solve the problems that the customers are bringing up. And it kind of goes back to our job is to really try to find customers, help them adopt the services. And when that doesn't quite work, look for other ways inside your bag. And then beyond that, look for ways to try to facilitate conversations to drive a roadmap. And sometimes you can't get there. Sometimes the need just doesn't make sense with what your company's purpose is or the way you see the marketplace evolving over time. But make that the job of the product team to get that feedback and make that determination when you've exhausted all the other options. And oftentimes that product team will not want you to filter it. They look for different things. They see the world through a different lens. And if you can bring that unfiltered directly from a customer's mouth to the product team, oftentimes you'll find they will hear things that you won't. So I think that's a big part of our role. And again, number one is it's yourself and use what you have. But when you can't, to just bridge that conversation with the product team or, with those that are looking for problems, the problem prospectors of the world. And the product side can be on the marketing side.
So appreciate going down that particular path. One of the other elements that you mentioned was to attribute 80% year-over-year growth was all about great team. And no doubt about it, we all say it's a great team, but you've scaled obviously a sales program and your sales program is working and it's great product, great team. How in the world do you start scaling a great team? Like, what are the secrets to success for scaling a great team?
Well, so the way I think about it, I think about the environment you're trying to create. We were very clear that we were trying to create a culture of success. And back in the early day where it was a couple of us in a room, we had to do everything. And we realized that the notion of having different roles, but still being part of one team, it did a few things for us. One, it took the individual drive for a goal and it made it a team drive, not I have to win and I want to be on a leaderboard. If it's a handful of people, leaderboard may not make sense. So we took a very team mentality and it did something magical for us when it came to building everything else. Like there's these 7 pillars of building out an organization, and all the way from segmentation, sales process, coverage, job design, comp systems, management cadence. There's a lot of work to be done to build this organization. And in the beginning, you just can't work on everything at once. So what we did is we were very clear that not everything will exist that we need into the future. But the most important thing was for us to get some rhythm and some cadence around what are the use cases that work? Where does the product solve a very clear need? Where are we able to get consistent, repeatable wins? And then how do you build around that? And how do you bring people onto the team? So that was a real team environment. And the team aspect, it allowed you to wallpaper over some of those things that were broken. So we didn't have all the comp plans figured out. We didn't have all the systems in place. And when you're large, all those things need to be in place. When you're small, a team can kind of navigate around that if you collaborate and you know that those are problems. So in the beginning, just having this team-based organization where you get paid as a team, you win as a team, lose as a team, it made some of those other sales organization aspects that come over time, it made us less dependent upon them in the beginning. And some will say we were 100% team-based for a little bit too long because sometimes the individuals didn't always feel like somebody else was pulling their weight. So if there's an area where, you should watch if you do that is sometimes you'll have that, it's like it's an irritation in the system for your high performers and you have to manage around that. And over time, you tease out how you bring some individual attainment and some individual recognition into that process. But we were very focused on the team in the beginning. And I think it instilled this culture of success and we win as a team and we take that very seriously.
Well, I would also argue that it probably built a culture of let's help each other out. You scratch my back, I'm going to scratch your back because at the end of the day, you're getting paid together, you're winning together, you're losing together, right?
Great point. You're exactly right. It's like you're listening in and you've been watching the tape.
But it's interesting though. What is the point that you come off this team bucket perspective, this team payment perspective? Yeah. Is it at 5 people, 10 people, 20 people? Is it at a number or when do you scale off of it?
I was probably the one anchoring us to do it as long as possible because you cannot kind of never go back. It's hard to pull individual attainment back to a team. So we started off 100% on the team and 0 on an individual. And then over time we bled in, went 75, 25 and 50, 50. And we've landed at something that's still 75% individual, but it's 25% team. So we keep that aspect in there. And it started to change there when the irritation became a distraction. So if you it did a couple of things. In the beginning, if they were just lone wolf hunters and wanted that individual environment, we weren't a good fit for them. And we didn't attract that kind of individual. But over time, you want to give a little more legs to that repeatable process. You start to feel comfortable that somebody could go off and the systems are in place that they can run a little more independently. And that started to happen around somewhere between the 10 and 20 mark. And we started to change our ecosystem to not be 100% team, to be a little bit less. And I mean, that's a process over years, though. I'm talking about like a continuum or a spectrum that spans 4 years.
Wow.
And when we open up new markets now, we go back and we do a team. So we still do recognize that there's some aspect of we're in this together and let's find a way to overcome these either systems gaps or in the marketplace, we haven't quite figured out how to get this interaction with the customer to be repeatable. And there is something magical about having somebody's shoulder to lean and cry on when things are difficult and not have it be at the expense of, some individual attainment.
Wow, it's very interesting. In all my years of business, of course, I know we have the team environment for the sales support resources, but I never thought about this from a sales perspective. I love what you're saying, and it makes total sense, which probably tees off very well or sets up the next point of conversation I wanted to talk about, which was growing deal size. I think you guys reported growing it by 40%. However, before we go into that particular topic, I want to take a short break and listen to this message from our program sponsor. I'm super excited to share that Vengreso will be joining the AAISP and hundreds of sales leaders in Chicago for the 10th annual AAISP Leadership Summit, April 3rd through the 5th, 2018. In fact, I personally will be presenting and I want to invite you to join me. The Leadership Summit brings together sales leaders from around the globe for a learning experience unlike any other. Attendees will find workshops, group learning, a technology expo packed full of today's leading solution and service providers, and of course, the infamous annual Inside Sales Award Gala. To receive your deeply discounted rate, visit bit.ly/AAISP2018. That's bit.ly/AAISP2018. And use the code LEADERSHIP1095 at registration for an amazing Vengreso only discount. All right. Before the break, I mentioned that I wanted to talk a little bit about how you grew deal size by 40%. There's obviously a secret here. Does it have anything to do with this whole concept of team, and especially as you open up new markets, or is it completely independent?
I think that the 40%, so the year-on-year growth on the deal size for us, I think that's really a function of us finding more use cases and expanding that product footprint. And how do we think about that in the context of what we did on the team side? We did a lot of good work for customers in the early days, and there wasn't a lot of individual attainment and customers feeling like they were getting sold product that didn't make sense. That team environment allowed us to just focus on doing the right thing to get those use cases to repeat. So the growth in ACV over time, we really were able to do that because we've moved up market, and that foundation for moving up market was really a function of the success stories that we had with the early customers, and them giving us permission to use them as references and giving us permission to find more use cases. If you do well in the use cases and the pain that you found originally, it gives you that credibility internally with them to go and say, well, what else is causing you problems and how might we solve that? Those were really the foundational elements that allowed us to kind of find ways to increase deal size over time. And there's also like an internal dynamic. I don't know if it's team-based necessarily, but you have the confidence to ask for more. In the early days, you think about the early days of bringing a product to market, you're embarrassed because you're not sure if it works as well as it should. There are certain areas that you have to navigate around. And over time, your confidence goes up as you have more and more wins to where you get to the point where you can ask for a deal size that may have seemed silly 3-4 years ago, but now you've built out the suite of services that you can bring that much value to a customer. And so much of that is just about having the confidence to ask for more. And that confidence to ask for more, it's a sliver of many things that we've done over the last few years, team being one part of that. But I think it's more about how the product has grown and you're bringing more value to the table.
Well, interestingly enough, and I could imagine this might have been hard, And I know a lot of sales reps, they, especially if they're segmented by, the SMB versus mid-market versus enterprise versus, globals, right? It's from a career perspective, it's oftentimes sales reps' goal is to move up, the pecking order, if you would, and start working on these larger, massive accounts. And by the way, larger, massive accounts doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. You might make more money in the SMB segment, but that having been said, it's the experience. But what I have found is that building up that confidence to ask for more, right, is difficult for oftentimes if you're a rep and you've been selling in this particular marketplace, right, and you're used to understanding budgets and dollar values at what, let's just say it's, $10,000 a month or whatever it might be, right? But when you move up market, now you can go for the $50,000 a month. I'm just making numbers up, but you get the idea. Do you find that the confidence to ask for more is challenged by the different market segments, meaning that as you move up in the market segments that you might have some of those mental blocks, if you would?
Well, if you think about your own purchasing patterns, the more you spend, the more you're going to double check that this is a good use of your money. And if you think about it in big chunks, if there's a service that you're spending $5,000 a year on, and then there's a similar service, but applied in a different context where they're getting a lot more value out of it, and perhaps you can charge $50,000 a year. If you keep going up that curve, the customer on the other end, there are approval processes, there are standards that and operating procedures that they have to go through on their end to get approval to spend this amount. And it gets more serious the bigger the check size. So if you're asking for $100,000 versus $1 million, you can imagine the amount of rigor that goes into that kind of a buy. And your confidence to be able to stand up and answer all those questions that they're going to get, help them champion that deal through, you have to take that serious. And part of that is just repeatability. So can you reference other customers that have had value come out of there? And others are, how well do you know the organization? Do you know if they're going to get that value out of it? And the only way you know that is by spending a lot of time with the customer and at the very least, listening to the kind of objections they're going to get internally and trying to find credible ways to make them feel comfortable that they can stand in front and say this is good use of their money.
Yeah, good point. In answer to the question I asked originally and earlier was all about, growing 80% year over year. And we started talking really about growing the deal size by 40% and how you guys been able to accomplish that. One of the things you mentioned was about leveraging prior customers as references. And I think fundamentally, most organizations do a really bad job at getting customer advocates to speak on your behalf. And there's tools that are out there now, customer advocacy type of tools that make it, easier for customers to engage. And we work so hard to try to get a customer case study, a press release of some sort, right? But one of the things that we found is every contract that we put together, in the contract, it is baked in. There are 3 elements that the client is going to sign off for. Number 1, a press release at our expense. Number 2, a up to 10-minute video testimonial. And number 3, a case study of which would be at our expense. And it's baked in. Customer agrees that they will, blah, 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 those 3 things, right? It's in every contract. Now we wait for the customer to tell us, oh, no, we can't do that. Or the customer to say, well, we'd rather not say will, we'd rather say may based upon your performance and whatnot, right? What we found is probably around 60% of most of our customers have not balked at it. And the other 40% have either changed it to will or, sorry, we can't commit to that. You need to remove that out of the contract. But what it does is it tees up the whole concept that you're talking about, which is create customers as a reference point. And if you look at how many sales organizations are scraping at the bottom of the barrel, like, I need a reference. I'm like, that's like one of the biggest challenges out there. It's getting a reference. And then you send out an email to the entire sales organization. Does anybody have a reference? Does anybody have a key of it? Like, what do you think about that idea in terms of actually baking that into every single contract that you do? And of course, maybe we're not talking about the online purchases. We're talking about like custom contracts, right? That you do. Do you agree with that idea? Or how do you turn your customers into references outside of just going to them after the fact?
Yeah, I think irrespective of whether, I think it's a great starting point. And if you have the kind of service that customers are delighted by and they see the value up front in the contracting process to where they could endorse the product or be a spokesperson on your behalf, what a wonderful position to be in. For the rest of the world that maybe doesn't have that facility, either way, you have to make that customer highly successful with what your product is or what your service is. And that is That's true whether it's in the contract or whether you're going back and asking for it after the fact and maybe you didn't get that agreement up front. Customers will endorse what they believe in, and it's rare that you get a high quality endorsement that you strong-armed in some way. So the way we think about it is you're right. You have these reference customers and you can wear them out. You think about being a reference for somebody that's in a job search mode. You're very happy to do a handful of references. If they're 10 or 15, I think you start to get to a point where you start talking about targeting. But the judicious use of resources, your customer reference are one of them. And getting them to do a phone call it's a pretty high bar, or come on stage with you at an event. That's a pretty high bar. Maybe getting a written case study, it's easier work for them after the case study is produced. But I still think it goes back to, if they're really happy with the service that you've provided them, that's the point at which you ask for a reference. And I know that there's no secret in that, but what is often not well understood is that can take time. Some services are very obvious, like you referenced, you can get it into contracting. Others are less obvious, and it takes some time to bleed the service in, at which point then you have the right to go back and ask to be a reference or to endorse you in some other fashion. I love the concept of getting it built in at the contracting phase. That's a best practice gold star.
Fantastic. The other one that I think a lot about this is maybe you don't necessarily need to go after the references. Maybe what you're really looking for is how to leverage the referral, right? And I just heard a stat. It was by OpenView. And after they did a study, and it showed that 84% of all sales opportunities that have entered into the pipeline are as a result of a referral. Meaning I, as a buyer, have called up or reached out to my online professional community or my trusted, close, knit friends that are my fellow CX, VP, director level, individuals. And I said, hey, I'm trying to solve this problem. Who have you guys used? And as a direct result, their trusted circle have said, hey, we've used so-and-so or such and such and such and such. And now all of a sudden, guess what happens? You've got a new visitor to your website. Right? Or here's my sales rep. I recommend that you talk to him or her. Right? And now all of a sudden you've got a new view on your LinkedIn profile from somebody. Right? So it's that referral that I think is an important element there to leverage. And I think a lot of sales reps really lose sight of that. And one of the best practices that we've implemented for digital is, if you've got a happy customer, ask them right up front, right after we finish the implementation, hey, by the way, John, Billy, Susie, whatever it might be, who else do you know in your network that might benefit from our service portfolio?
That is a great indicator of success. Exactly. Whether they open up their network for you. And what a wonderful way to get feedback on how you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Man, we've had a phenomenal conversation here, all about, growing year over year, growing your deal size, and some great tips and tricks here. I love the fact that you guys have designed a fairly team-based environment that has moved into, obviously, individual-based performance, and you guys are living, breathing it, and in the trenches. So, Chris, that was phenomenal. But here's what I want to do. I want to ask you, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, if they're interested in reaching out to you, what's the best way? Is it through LinkedIn, Twitter, email? How should they get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is a good way to get a hold of me, or pretty open about just being Chris at Cloudflare. If I can be helpful, I'm happy to try to be helpful to anybody. All
right. Well, we'll add that into the show notes. And Chris, I always ask all my guests this. This is one of my closing questions, and that is, do me a favor, tell us your all-time favorite movie.
For me, it's got to be The Endless Summer by Bruce Brown. It's this late 60s, I think, surf movie that idealizes and shows two guys that are traveling the globe, chasing surf and living the dream. And, the fun fact in that movie is that it was opened in the middle of the Midwest, in the middle of the winter in a snowstorm. And the reaction was very high quality, and they rolled that out across the country. But that's perhaps my nirvana. It's a little bit of insight into what I might do if I'm not doing this job.
Enjoying the surf, traveling the world. I love it. Fantastic having you. And by the way, we'll make sure we put notes back into Cloudflare. So if anybody's interested in the platform, they certainly can reach out to you or your sales organization and make that happen. Congratulations on all of your success. And thank you for being part of Selling with Social. Stay tuned for this message here from our program sponsor. Don't forget to join Vengreso and hundreds of sales leaders from around the globe, April 3rd through the 5th, 2018 in Chicago for the 10th annual AAISP Leadership Summit. To receive your deeply discounted rate, visit bit.ly/AAISP 2018. That's bit.ly/AAISP AAISP2018 and use the code LEADERSHIP1095 at registration for an amazing Vengreso only discount. Thanks so much for joining me on that episode of Selling with Social. I hope you found as much value in that episode as I did. Here's what I want you to do next. Please go to www.vengreso.com. That's VENGRESO.com. VENGRESO.com. And make sure that you get access to our content. We've got the latest and greatest in digital sales, sales training, content marketing, and social selling strategies that are going to help you grow your sales pipeline. I look forward to having you on the next show of Selling with Social. Make sure you also go to vengreso.com/podcast to be able to get access to the latest and greatest Selling with Social episodes, along with any of the other episodes that we've got from Social Business Engines with my friend and partner, Bernie Borges. Thanks again for joining on Selling with Social.